Hello and welcome back to Roll for Damage. We are continuing our Hero Forge Custom Mini tutorial, and today I'm going to show you how I color them in Gimp. So first I'm going to change up my little pose and I'm going to kill off poor Raziel. At least make him unconscious. So I'm going to export this to Gimp as always, and we're going to cut them out with our selection tool. If you're unfamiliar how to do this, watch my previous tutorial and showing you how to actually do the cardboard minis, and it's pretty simple. So we're just going to make sure that we have our same area selected, and the purpose of doing this is if you keep the same size format of 8.5 by 12, no matter where you copy and paste the mini, it'll be the same size. If you change the actual format of the page by accident, the size of the mini will be off regardless if it's the actual same size number, if that makes sense. Alright, so we're going to zoom in on them. And the wonderful thing about these renderings of these 3D objects is they have lowlights and highlights built into them already. We're going to use that to our advantage, and we're only going to use a couple tools, and my main tool is actually the airbrush tool. So we're going to make a selection, and I'm going to start off with this trim. Now we have two tools we can use, and I would refrain from using the fuzzy select tool, and I'm going to show you why. Because if I select somewhere on him, it'll select anything similar to that color of pixel that I selected, and that's not going to do us any good. Like sometimes it'll go outside the armor, it'll cover different pieces of the player, and that's not what we want. So we want this little thing next to it called the free selection tool. In Photoshop I believe it's called the lasso. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace his armor, and I'm going to go below the armor where the actual dark gray is, and I always want to stay on the outside because basically this airbrush is kind of like a shader of sorts. It's just going to slowly apply color over the top of this object. So if I go over the gray piece, it'll slowly add shading and darkening, but if I miss it, it's going to leave that piece dark gray or light gray. And at the scale that this mini is going to be, it's not going to be noticeable, but as an artist, it drives me insane. So I just like to make sure that I actually have all the shades colored. And in my first tutorial I went over this, but you have to make sure your last dot connects to your first for it to activate the entire area. Now the reason I'm highlighting all this is because when we airbrush, it's only going to airbrush whatever is inside of those squiggly lines. So let's open up our airbrush, double click on it, and I'm going to make sure that your settings are matching mine. I hit reset, but I'm not sure if this was default or not. Nothing moved, but I'm pretty sure I moved this originally to 20 and it stayed the same. So I'm just going to go over and make sure you keep it the same settings I have. So you want your brush size to 20, and that's not you know, set in stone. That's just the size I like. Feel free to use any color or any size brush that you wish. However, what is important is that your brush is set to pressure opacity. That's the setting that basically softly overlays color. And we were going to set our opacity to 20. That way we're just putting 20% color down over our object. Now click and hold it down and just slowly, just color in. Now no matter how much I color with this, if I've never let my finger off that mouse button, it'll never get any darker. It only goes to 20%. If I want to darken, and I do, I want to shade spots where the sun is not going to hit, or the torch or whatever. And this being a face down, your face, like your actual face watching this, is the light source, and that's how you look at it. So I'm going to hit all the areas that I believe are going to be low laying, or line, however you want to pronounce it. And basically I'm just shading and coloring, giving highlights, lowlights with one color. All I've used was yellow. So I went one color or cover over the entire trim for the base coat, and it gives it that natural highlight. And then I went one extra coat in the dark spots. I'm going to do the same thing with this brown. However, I'm going to darken even more by where his chest goes down at the shoulders, where it goes down by his rib cage, and in the center of his chest where that tear is. And see how it gives it that nice 3D effect? Pretty simple. And we didn't do any of the work. The program did all the work for us because that shading is already built into the Hero Forge snapshot. And this is a really good example with the skin tone because it really stands out. Now, I did one full coat. I did one extra around his ears, under his neck, his clavicle, and his side of his neck. Now here is an error in the actual model. And you see how his tunic is coming past his sash. Well, I want to fix that, and I'm basically just going to ignore that when I'm coloring, and I'm going to go and select right over it. And as I color in, it'll basically just slowly hide that little seam. And again, I know this is going very quickly, I'm sorry. This was a 50-minute video that I'm trying to condense into 15. So if you have any questions, please just leave a comment and I'll be happy to answer it. I do plan on releasing these in full, just for those who need the step-by-step guide. It's just a little longer to edit those. So I'll get those out to you soon. It'll probably be a 3-part series, and probably like 12 minutes of video. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is I went ahead and selected the entire area, and you see how it's got that yellow on the inside of my plate? Well, now I'm going to go back and select the inside, just as we do with everything else, and I'm going to use that eyedropper tool, and I'm going to select that middle pixel, and that gives me the gray color of the middle. And I'm going to use my airbrush to go back and basically color over it gray, that way it matches, and then pick a black and then slowly apply shading to the outer areas. That way it gives it a 3-dimensional effect, because at that point if we just applied gray, it would look wonky, it would look flat, and it just wouldn't fit the rest of the dynamic. Alright, so now I'm going in his cloak, and as you see I'm shading with black, and first off it was a darker red than his sash, and I go back and fix this later on so they match. But to give that 3-dimensional appearance, we're going to go a dark red, and then where his thigh and sash are going to block light, we're going to go darker. And then where the sun would hit, where the light would hit his sash, will be a brighter red. And that's about the size of the mini that you're going to be printing. So again, a lot of this detail is for nothing. It's just you know, peace of mind. Alright, so now I'm showing you the burn tool. And basically when I zoomed out, his face was lost in detail. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to double click the burn tool at the bottom, and it says dodge or burn. Dodge is going to lighten the area, and burn is going to darken it. So we want to make sure we're on midtones, and then just slowly start burning it in. And you see how his eye sockets are nice and dark. Again, probably a detail that's going to be lost. And what I'm going to attempt now is, I was thinking about doing his eyebrows next, but I wasn't happy with his hair. His hair was more white than I wanted it to be. Raziel is a paladin, and he's an older gentleman, so he has gray and basically salt and pepper hair. And I need his eyebrows to match that, so before I went with his eyebrows, I'm going to go and use the same thing we did with his eye sockets on his actual hair. So we're going to highlight all of his hair. And then I'm going to select, I believe that's shadow. That's kind of hard to see right here on my screen. But it's the last option. And see how it brings the white. It covers all the highlights, and maybe it is highlights, I'm not sure. And then we're going to go back and darken the areas with that top option. And again, I apologize, I can't really read what that says, but I know one says highlights, one says midtones, and one is shadows. Alright, so now I have gray, and I brought my flow, and what flow is how much paint it's going to apply at once. And with it being a light gray over a dark surface, it would take a lot longer if I didn't have a light, if I had a light flow and I didn't put a heavier coat on it, so that's why I boosted that flow up. And now I'm showing you that, just keep in mind that in the fantasy world, and if you don't know anything about leather, it's very, very different no matter where you go. Even the same piece of leather by the same craftsman, dyed at different times, can look different. So what I did was I applied different colors to his bag on the other side of his hip. That way all his leather didn't match, and it gives it a little bit more realness to it, and not so two-dimensional. Alright, so now I'm going in and fixing his sash and applying a little bit darker to give it, it was a little fake looking, and I still have that little highlight that I went over and left right there on top of his thigh. We colored the shield the same way with everything else. And you see those little things on their wrist? Well, that's actually a plate, like gauntlets on the other side, but in the model from this side it was just weird. So I just went ahead and used the eraser tool and erased it off this view. And again, I am changing the leather tones, and I'm putting 2 dark tones, I'm going 2 light tones, and then the burn tool I'm going twice, just on the bottom side. Alright, well, thank y'all for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Again, I will be releasing another series after this. It'll probably be out in the next few days, and it'll be the complete video in, almost in full. Of course I'm going to edit it, but take a lot of the fat out, but it's not going to be sped up like it is now, and it'll give you a step-by-step. So I hope this helps anybody. Thank y'all for watching. PJ out.